Welcome, dear friends, to a tale of a woman's journey through the depths of despair and the unexpected twists of fate. Enjoy the story. Valerie Mitchell stood in the middle of her tiny studio apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the remnants of her once comfortable life. At 45, she felt like she was starring in her own personal tragedy, a far cry from the happily ever after she'd imagined when she said, "I do," 2 decades ago. "Get it together, Val," she muttered to herself, brushing away a stray tear. "You've hit rock bottom. The only way to go is up." But as she surveyed the depressing scene around her, Valerie wondered if there was an even lower level of rock bottom she hadn't discovered yet. The apartment was a far cry from the spacious condo she'd shared with her ex-husband, Tom. The divorce had blindsided her, leaving her emotionally and financially drained. To add insult to injury, the accounting firm where she'd worked for the past 15 years had unceremoniously laid her off last month. Budget cuts, they'd said. But Valerie couldn't help but wonder if her recent distraction and declining performance had played a part. A knock at the door startled her from her gloomy reverie. "Mom?" called a voice from the hallway. "Are you home?" Valerie quickly wiped her eyes and plastered on a smile. "Come in, Max," she called, silently thanking the universe for her son. At 17, Max was the one bright spot in her life, the reason she got up every morning determined to keep fighting. Max entered, his lanky frame filling the doorway. His eyes, so like his father's, took in the mess of boxes and his mother's forced smile. "How's the unpacking going?" he asked, though they both knew it was a rhetorical question. Valerie shrugged. "Oh, just taking my time. How was school?" Max dropped his backpack on the floor and flopped onto the threadbare couch, the only piece of furniture Tom had generously let her keep. Same old, same old. Mr. Peterson gave us a pop quiz in calculus. Pretty sure I bombed it." Valerie's heart clenched. Max was smart, brilliant even, but the stress of the divorce and their sudden change in circumstances had taken its toll on his grades. She longed to hire a tutor, to give him the support he needed, but that was a luxury they simply couldn't afford right now. "I'm sure you did fine," she said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "Hey, how about we order a pizza tonight, to celebrate our new place?" Max's eyes lit up for a moment before dimming again. "Mom, we don't have to. I know money's tight." "Nonsense," Valerie interrupted, though her stomach churned at the thought of the dwindling balance in her checking account. "We deserve a treat. Why don't you call it in while I finish up here?" As Max dialed the pizza place, Valerie retreated to the tiny bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink as she stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Dark circles shadowed her once bright blue eyes, and streaks of gray had appeared in her auburn hair almost overnight. "Pull yourself together," she whispered fiercely to her reflection. "You can do this. You have to do this. For Max." With a deep breath, Valerie straightened her shoulders and rejoined her son in the living room. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would find a job. Any job. They would get through this one day at a time. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to Valerie's mood as she set out on her job hunt. She'd donned her best suit, now slightly ill-fitting after weeks of stress eating, and armed herself with a stack of resumes and a determination bordering on desperation. Her first stop was a local law firm where she'd heard they needed an accountant. The receptionist, a perky blonde who looked barely out of high school, gave Valerie a once-over that made her acutely aware of every new wrinkle and gray hair. "I'm sorry," the girl said, not sounding sorry at all. "We're really looking for someone with fresher experience. Someone who can grow with the company." Valerie bit back a retort about the value of actual experience and forced a polite smile. "I understand. Thank you for your time." The next few hours followed a similar pattern. At a bustling tech startup, the interviewer barely glanced at her resume before spouting some nonsense about cultural fit. A family-owned bookstore seemed promising until Valerie realized the competitive salary they'd advertised wouldn't even cover her rent. By mid-afternoon, Valerie's feet were aching, and her spirit was thoroughly crushed. She'd always prided herself on her resilience, but this constant rejection was wearing her down. As she passed a dingy gas station on the outskirts of town, a help wanted sign caught her eye. Valerie hesitated. Gas station attendant wasn't exactly the career move she'd envisioned, but at this point, any paycheck would be welcome. Squaring her shoulders, she marched inside. The manager, a portly man with a permanent scowl, looked up from his newspaper as Valerie approached the counter. "Help you?" he grunted. "I saw your sign," Valerie said, gesturing to the window. "I'd like to apply for the job." The manager, his name tag read Earl, gave her a skeptical once-over. "You ever work a gas station before?" Valerie hesitated. "Well, no, but I'm a quick learner. I have years of experience in customer service and—" Earl cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Look, lady, I don't need your life story. Can you work nights and weekends?" Valerie thought of Max, of the time they already rarely got to spend together. But beggars couldn't be choosers. "Yes," she said firmly, "I can work whenever you need me." Earl grunted again, seemingly his preferred method of communication. "Fine, you start tomorrow, 6 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." As Valerie left the gas station, clutching her new work schedule, she felt a mix of relief and despair. She had a job. That was something. But as she imagined telling Max about her new role as a gas station attendant, her cheeks burned with shame. "It's temporary," she muttered to herself as she walked home, "just until something better comes along." Little did Valerie know, something better was just around the corner, but not before life threw a few more curveballs her way. A week into her new job at Earl's Gas and Go, Valerie was beginning to wonder if unemployment might have been the better option. Her feet ached constantly from standing on the concrete floor. Her hands were chapped from the constant exposure to gasoline and cleaning products, and the less said about the state of the employee bathroom, the better. But the worst part was the crushing tedium. After years of juggling complex spreadsheets and financial reports, Valerie's brain felt like it was slowly turning to mush. The highlight of her day was usually a brief chat with Mrs. Henderson, an elderly regular who always had a kind word and a peppermint to share. It was during one of these moments of respite that disaster struck. Valerie had just finished filling Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick when she noticed the pump hadn't shut off automatically as it should have. In her haste to stop the overflow, Valerie accidentally knocked the nozzle, sending a spray of gasoline across the concrete. "Oh dear," Mrs. Henderson clucked sympathetically. "Don't worry, dear. These things happen." But Valerie's heart was pounding. She'd overcharged Mrs. Henderson by at least $20 money, the kind old woman could ill afford to lose. But before Valerie could say anything, Mrs. Henderson had driven away with a cheery wave. "Mitchell!" Earl's bellow cut through the air like a foghorn. "My office now." Valerie's stomach churned as she followed Earl into the cramped, dingy office that smelled perpetually of stale cigarettes and cheap cologne. "You want to explain to me how we just lost $20? Earl growled, jabbing a stubby finger at the security monitor. Valerie took a deep breath. "It was an accident, Earl. The pump malfunctioned. I'll pay for it myself." "Damn right you will," Earl interrupted. "I want that money on my desk by tomorrow morning, or you can kiss this job goodbye. Got it?" Valerie nodded mutely, fighting back tears of frustration and humiliation. As she left the office, she caught sight of her reflection in the grimy window. Who was this woman, with the defeated posture and the ill-fitting uniform? What would her younger self think if she could see her now? That evening, Valerie returned to her apartment, dreading the conversation she knew she had to have with Max. She found him at the kitchen table, hunched over a pile of textbooks. "Hey, sweetie," she said, forcing cheer into her voice. "How was school?" Max looked up, his brow furrowed with concentration. "Fine, I guess. We got our math test back." Valerie's heart sank at his tone. "And?" Max shrugged, sliding the paper across the table. A big red D glared up at her, accompanied by a note from the teacher suggesting after-school tutoring. "Oh, Max," Valerie sighed, sinking into a chair. "What happened? Math used to be your best subject." "I don't know," Max mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "It's just hard to focus lately, you know?" Valerie did know. She knew all too well the toll their changed circumstances were taking on her bright, sensitive son. And now, with this gas station fiasco— "Max," she began hesitantly, "I need to talk to you about something." Over the next few minutes, Valerie laid out the situation, the accident at work, the money she owed, their increasingly dire financial straits. To his credit, Max listened quietly, his face a mask of concern far too mature for his 17 years. "It's okay, Mom," he said when she'd finished, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "We'll figure it out. Maybe I can pick up some odd jobs around the neighborhood, help out a bit." Valerie's throat tightened with emotion. "Oh, honey, you shouldn't have to worry about this. You should be focusing on school, on being a teenager." Max shrugged, a wry smile twisting his lips. "Yeah, well, life doesn't always go according to plan, right?" As Valerie hugged her son close, she sent up a silent prayer to whoever might be listening. They needed a break, a miracle, anything to turn their luck around. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, perfectly matching Valerie's mood as she trudged to work. She'd spent a sleepless night tossing and turning, trying to figure out where she could possibly scrape together the money she owed Earl. In the end, she'd been forced to pawn her grandmother's antique locket, a family heirloom she'd hoped to pass down to Max's future wife someday. As she approached the gas station, a knot of dread formed in her stomach. Would Earl fire her on the spot? Or would he drag out the humiliation, making her work her shift before lowering the axe? Valerie was so lost in her gloomy thoughts that she almost missed the sleek midnight blue Aston Martin that purred into the station. It was so out of place among the usual parade of beat-up trucks and sensible sedans that Valerie did a double-take. The car's tinted window rolled down, revealing a man who looked like he'd just stepped off the cover of GQ. Chiseled jawline, artfully tousled hair, and eyes so piercingly blue they put the car to shame. "Fill her up, please," the man said, flashing a smile that probably came with its own warning label. "Premium." Valerie nodded, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite her racing heart. As she began to pump the gas, she couldn't help but sneak glances at the mystery man. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't quite place it. "Excuse me." The man's voice startled her out of her reverie. "I don't mean to be forward, but haven't we met before?" Valerie blushed, fumbling with the pump. "I'm sorry, I don't think—" "Wait, I've got it!" the man exclaimed, snapping his fingers. "You used to work at Goldstein and Associates, right? In accounting?" Valerie's eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, I did until recently. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name." The man grinned, extending his hand. Jack Henderson. I was there for a board meeting last year. You helped me make sense of some particularly gnarly spreadsheets." As Valerie shook his hand, her mind raced. Jack Henderson? Of course. He was the wunderkind CEO who'd been making waves in the tech world. What on earth was he doing at this rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere? "So," Jack said, leaning casually against his car, "what brings a talented accountant like yourself to this fine establishment?" Valerie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Oh, the economy, budget cuts, the usual story." Jack's brow furrowed. "That's a shame. Good accountants are hard to find. I just acquired a new startup, and we're in desperate need of someone to whip our books into shape. Any chance you'd be interested?" Valerie's heart leaped into her throat. Was this really happening? But before she could respond, a gruff voice cut through the air like a chainsaw. "Mitchell, my office now!" Earl's bellow shattered the moment. Valerie turned to see her manager glowering from the doorway of the gas station, his face an alarming shade of puce. "I'm so sorry," Valerie said to Jack, mortification washing over her. "I have to go. It was nice seeing you again." As Valerie hurried towards Earl's office, she could feel Jack's eyes on her back. She'd just blown what might have been her one chance at salvation. Blinking back tears of frustration, she steeled herself for whatever Earl had in store. But to her surprise, Earl's anger seemed to have evaporated. In its place was a look of grudging respect, and was that a hint of fear? "Mitchell," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "There's been a development regarding yesterday's incident." Valerie's confusion must have shown on her face because Earl continued. "That fancy car out there? Turns out it belongs to Mrs. Henderson's grandson. He came in this morning, paid for the extra gas and then some, said his grandmother told him how kind you always are to her." Relief washed over Valerie like a tidal wave. "So, I'm not fired? Earl shifted uncomfortably. No, you're not fired. In fact, good job, I guess, with the customer service and all. Valerie nodded, still somewhat dazed by this turn of events. As she turned to leave the office, Earl called out, "Oh, and Mitchell? That guy out there was asking about you. Said something about a job offer. You do what you gotta do, all right?" With a small smile of gratitude, Valerie left the office. Her head was spinning. In the span of 10 minutes, her entire world had turned upside down, again. But this time, it seemed fortune might finally be smiling on her. As she stepped back outside, she half expected Jack and his fancy car to be gone. But there he was, leaning against the Aston Martin with a look of amusement. "Everything okay?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Valerie took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Mr. Henderson." "Jack, please." "Jack, about that job offer. I'd like to hear more." Jack's face broke into a grin that could have powered the entire gas station. "I was hoping you'd say that. How about we discuss it over lunch? I know a great little place in the city." As Valerie hesitated, glancing back at the gas station, Jack added, "Don't worry about your shift. I've already cleared it with your manager. Seems he's suddenly very accommodating." Valerie couldn't help but laugh. "I bet he is. Just give me a moment to change." 10 minutes later, Valerie emerged from the dingy employee bathroom, having done her best to make herself presentable. As she slid into the passenger seat of Jack's luxury car, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the side mirror. For the first time in months, she saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. As they pulled out of the gas station, Valerie couldn't resist a triumphant wave to Earl, who was watching from the window with a mixture of awe and envy. "So," Jack said, as they merged onto the highway, "tell me what's been going on with you since Goldstein and Associates. I have to admit, I was pretty surprised to find you working at a gas station." Valerie took a deep breath. "It's a long story," she warned. Jack grinned. "We've got time, and I'm a good listener." Over the next hour, as they made their way to the city, Valerie found herself pouring out the whole sordid tale: the divorce, the job loss, the struggle to make ends meet. To her surprise, Jack listened without judgment, occasionally asking thoughtful questions or offering words of sympathy. "Wow," he said when she'd finished. "You've been through the ringer, haven't you? But I've got to say, Valerie, I'm impressed. Lesser people would have given up by now." Valerie shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I didn't have a choice. I have a son to think about." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Tell me about him." As Valerie spoke about Max, his intelligence, his kindness, his recent struggles, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. It had been so long since she'd been able to talk to someone like this, without fear of judgment or pity. Before she knew it, they were pulling up to a sleek high-rise in the heart of downtown. "We're here," Jack announced. Valerie's eyes widened as she took in the building. "This is the restaurant?" Jack chuckled. "Not exactly. This is my office. I hope you don't mind, but I thought we could discuss the job opportunity more officially." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Valerie's stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Was this really happening? Or would she wake up any moment, back in her tiny apartment, facing another day of mind-numbing work at the gas station? The elevator doors opened to reveal a bustling office space, all gleaming glass and polished chrome. Heads turned as Jack led Valerie through the maze of desks, whispers following in their wake. Jack ushered her into a spacious corner office with a view that made Valerie's head spin. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to a plush leather chair. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" Valerie shook her head, perching on the edge of the chair. "I'm fine, thank you. Mr. Henderson?" "Jack," he reminded her gently. "Jack?" Valerie corrected herself. "I appreciate you bringing me here, but I'm a little confused. What exactly is this job opportunity you mentioned?" Jack leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. "Valerie, do you know what my company does?" She shook her head. "I'm afraid I don't know much about your work beyond what I've read in the papers." "We're a tech startup," Jack explained. "We develop AI solutions for financial management. Our latest project is an app that helps small businesses streamline their accounting processes. The thing is, we're great at the tech side, but we need someone who really understands the nitty-gritty of accounting to make sure we're meeting real-world needs. Valerie's mind raced as she began to see where this was going. And you think I could help with that? Jack nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. I remember how quickly you grasped our financial situation during that board meeting last year. You have a gift for making complex information accessible. That's exactly what we need. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Valerie, I'm offering you the position of head of financial integration. You'd be working directly with our development team to ensure our products meet the highest standards of accounting practice. It's a senior position, with a salary to match. Valerie's head spun. This morning, she'd been worried about scraping together gas money. Now she was being offered a dream job? It seemed too good to be true. I don't know what to say, she stammered. This is incredibly generous, but are you sure? I mean, I've been out of the industry for months, and my situation… Jack held up a hand to stop her. Valerie, I don't care about gaps in your resume or personal setbacks. I care about talent and work ethic, both of which you have in spades. As for your situation, well, let's just say I have some experience with unexpected life changes myself. He stood, moving to gaze out the window. My grandfather, Mrs. Henderson's husband, built a successful business from nothing. When he died, I inherited everything. But it wasn't until I nearly lost it all in a bad investment that I truly appreciated the value of hard work and perseverance. Turning back to Valerie, Jack's face was serious. That's what I see in you, Valerie, the kind of resilience and determination that can't be taught. So, what do you say? Are you ready to get back in the game? Valerie's heart raced. This was everything she dreamed of and more, but a nagging doubt held her back. It's an incredible opportunity, she said slowly, but I have to think about Max. We've just moved, and with everything he's been through… Jack nodded understanding. Of course, family comes first. How about this? Take the weekend to think it over. Talk to Max. If you decide to accept, we can discuss flexible hours, maybe even some work-from-home options. I want this to work for both of you. As they stood to shake hands, Jack added, Oh, and one more thing. I have a friend who's an excellent lawyer. If you'd like, he can take a look at your divorce settlement, see if there's any way to get you a fairer deal. Valerie blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his kindness. Thank you, Jack, for everything. As Jack drove her home, Valerie's mind whirled with possibilities. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope, to dream of a better future for herself and Max. Pulling up to her apartment building, Jack handed her a business card. My personal number's on the back, he said. Call me any time if you have questions. And Valerie, whatever you decide. I'm glad we reconnected today. Valerie clutched the card like a lifeline. So am I, Jack. So am I. As she watched the Aston Martin disappear around the corner, Valerie took a deep breath. She had a lot to think about, a lot to discuss with Max. But one thing was certain. Her luck had finally changed. Squaring her shoulders, Valerie marched into her building, head held high. The gas station uniform was shoved unceremoniously into a garbage bag. She had a future to plan, and it didn't include the smell of gasoline and stale cigarettes. That evening, as Valerie and Max sat at their tiny kitchen table, she recounted the day's events. Max listened with wide eyes, his half-eaten slice of pizza forgotten. Mom, he said when she'd finished, you have to take this job. It's perfect. Valerie smiled at his enthusiasm. It does seem too good to pass up, doesn't it? But Max, it would mean some big changes. We might have to move again and… Max cut her off with a wave of his hand. Mom, stop. You've sacrificed everything for me. It's time you did something for yourself. Besides, he added with a grin, I wouldn't mind living in a place with actual hot water. Laughing, Valerie pulled her son into a hug. When did you get so wise, huh? As they cleared the table together, Valerie felt a sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow she would call Jack and accept his offer. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. But for the first time in a long time, Valerie Mitchell was ready to face the future head-on. From gas station attendant to tech executive in a single day, it was the kind of story you'd read in a trashy novel or see in a made-for-TV movie. But for Valerie, It was real, and it was just the beginning. As she fell asleep that night, Valerie allowed herself a small, secret smile. Take that, Tom, she thought. Your loss is about to become my greatest victory. The next chapter of Valerie Mitchell's life was about to begin, and this time she was determined to write her own happily ever after.